Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. Welcome also to those watching the meeting on YouTube. During the live broadcast, members and officers are asked to please ensure that mobile phones are placed in silent mode. Only audio from the microphones will be captured on live stream. Therefore, please ensure they are switched on when speaking and switched off when you have finished speaking. Minutes will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on YouTube until such time as the minutes are produced. The first item on today's agenda is the appointment of the Chairman for the municipal year 2024 to 25. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Mrs French?
Councillor Miss French.
Thank you. You nominate Councillor Miss French. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Are there any other nominations? It is therefore proposed that Councillor Kim French is appointed as the Chair of the Audit and Risk Management Committee for the municipal year 2024-2025. Is that agreed?
Yes.
Thank you. I will now hand over conduct of the meeting to the Chair.
Thank you, members. I will begin with agenda item 2 and call upon member services to report any apologies for absence.
Thank you. We've had apologies from Councillor Booth and Councillor Mockett.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3. Agenda item 3 is the appointment of Vice Chairman for the municipal year of 24-25. I would like to nominate Councillor Mockett. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Mrs French. Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other nominees? No? Thank you. The proposal is therefore to appoint Councillor Mockett as the Vice Chairman of the Audit and Risk Committee for the municipal year 24-25. Is that agreed?
Yes.
Thank you, members. Councillor Mockett, you are duly appointed in your absence. Agenda item 4 is to confirm and sign the minutes of the previous meeting of the 25th of March 2024 as being a correct record. Do I have a proposer to approve the minutes? Councillor Christie, thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mrs French, thank you. Does any member have any comments to make on these minutes? No? Can I have a show of hands to approve these minutes? Thank you, members. The minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of March 2024 are agreed. Agenda item 5 is to report additional items for consideration which the Chairman deems urgent by virtue of special circumstances now to be specified. I believe there are none. Agenda item 6 is to receive any declarations of interest under the Local Code of Conduct in respect of any items to be discussed at this meeting. If you have anything to declare, can you please raise your hand? No hands are raised, thank you. Agenda item 7 is the interim value for money report. I now call upon Mark Hodgson from Ernst & Young External Auditors to introduce the report.
Thank you, good afternoon. So in terms of this agenda item, members will remember that we brought our forward-looking 23-24 audit plan to the last meeting of this committee, and that's part of the recovery phase, moving to the most recent financial year and information, more of which I'll talk about as part of agenda item 8. But part of the reset process is to conclude the outstanding year for 22-23, and part of that is the VFM code responsibilities. So this is the interim report to that effect. It's marked interim because you can't formally conclude a value for money arrangement work until you sign the audit opinion, in case you need to take anything into account that impacts a year that is still outstanding. So that's why it's labelled interim at this stage and will remain so until the point we sign the audit opinion in respect of 22-23. In terms of the report and your page numbers, so on page 14 you will see that we raised or identified one risk that there could be weaknesses in arrangements at the authority in relation to the publication of the draft statement of accounts for 22-23, which was after the 31st of May 23 publication date, those accounts being published on the 9th of February. So that was at the planning stage, a risk had been identified. So just hold that thought until I move on to the explanation. So on page 15, given that we had identified that one risk, we did not identify any weaknesses in the council's underlying arrangements, and that will be the conclusion, all things being equal, going forward. What's important, therefore, is the commentary that surrounds the risk and the other arrangements that the council has in place. So section 2 on page 18 of your papers does set out that in-year commentary of what happened, and page 19 specifically addresses the risk that we identified. So we have gained sufficient assurances in relation to the risk, and in relation to the late publication of the accounts, the council did rightly publish a notice at the point of time, being the 31st of May, setting out the reasons for the delay. Those reasons being the prioritisation of the closure of the previous year's 21-22 accounts, which were then concluded on the 27th of September 23. The note also, or our work, also acknowledges that the finance team were depleted without a deputy chief accountant, who was a vacant post through to October, or from October 22 through to April 23. And clearly that has an impact on closure procedures, but are now fully staffed. So with the 22-23 accounts being published 4 months after that publication, after the date of our opinion, I am comfortable that that is within a reasonable period of time. So it's normally a 2-month period, this 4-month period being the normal 2 months plus 2 months because of budget setting and council tax setting being a priority for the council as part of its normal business cycle. So I completely understand the rationale for that. I think anything longer into 6, 7, 8 months and we might have come to a different conclusion, but given the time of year and closing the previous year's accounts in September, I think that is not unreasonable. And therefore that risk kind of gets parked and there is no underlying risk to the conclusion. Appendix A from page 22 onwards just updates the underlying arrangements across all of the council's arrangements in 22-23, which is a build on those that we reported in our auditor's annual report for 21-22 in October 23. So that gets you up to speed to where we are for 22-23, and happy to take any questions.
Can I have a proposer for the report, please? Councillor Christie, thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Mrs French, thank you. And now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any questions or comments. Councillor Christie.
Thanks for that, Mark. Yeah, I've just got one question for us. I suppose when people see the sort of a sign, they say significant weakness identified, just want to clarify, in your opinion, that do you see there's any material or significant implications as a result of those draft accounts being published late?
I think the late publication can be taken in a number of ways by different stakeholders. So I think it's important, the conclusion we've come to about the rationale for why it was late. Clearly we, as the external auditor, are only one of the stakeholders. And I think clearly local council taxpayers and residents are another. I think it's been very clear in the notice that the council published at the time and media attention nationally and our reports that there is an issue with local audit and delays to audit work, and therefore opinions, and therefore knock-on impacts for future years, of which this is one. So overall, when you have 1 year outstanding that was late, I don't think there is any conclusion to be drawn as long as there is a good timetable in place to catch up 23-24. We've discussed that as part of the last of the audit plan at the last committee meeting for 23-24 and have a timetable with officers. Clearly the publication of the 23-24 draft set of statements and hitting that timetable will be key to a conclusion going forward.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, of course.
On that subject, I will just actually say that we haven't published our 23-24 draft statement of accounts yet. But again, that's a deliberate decision by myself and the team because of other priorities. We are looking to publish in August but we're not due to have an audit till October. So again, we're not seeing that as a big issue, and this is really, Councillor Christie, about resource prioritisation. And given the amount of public interest we have in our accounts, when we do publish them, I can say that I don't think it's a huge risk.
Any other questions, members? No? For no further speakers, therefore, the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to note the interim value for money report 22-23. Can you please raise your hand if you disagree with the report? Thank you, members. For no raised hands, therefore, the report is agreed. Agenda item 8 is the verbal update on reset and recover approach on local government audits. I now call upon Mark again to provide an update to the committee.
Thank you. So this is really a build on what we discussed in March when I was last here, and all things were progressing nicely. So the 3 consultations had been held, and documentation and ministerial action was being prepared. But then the general election was called, which put a hold on the ability for that legislation to be passed through Parliament because of PERDA, and clearly with a new government coming into play recently, where there is a question about how high it is on the new minister's priority list. But all of the previous discussions did have cross-party support, so we would expect, and all the initial conversations are pointing that it will go through. It's just a timing issue now. So there is insufficient time now to lay it before parliamentary recess for the summer, and then clearly you're into September. So what we can probably assume is that the 30th of September backstop date cannot now be enacted in time. So we would expect a new backstop date to be put in the legislation when it does go before Parliament for agreement. We don't know what that date could be. It could be the end of November, December, January. It's all depending on the parliamentary timeline. But I think it's good news that the Deputy Prime Minister is the Minister for DCLG, as it is now known, not DLUC anymore. So I think a little bit of prominence to that. And again, we've heard nothing that would say it's not going to go ahead. What it does mean in terms of the timetable is, as we've discussed, we'll do your 23-24 audit work through late October, November, I think, with the view to bringing an audit results report to you as a committee, which will be the end of the audit process, but will then be in a holding pattern until we can issue the audit opinion, because they have to be issued sequentially. So we can't sign 22-23 until the legislation is enacted and we know what the backstop date is. Then we can do the signing of 23-24. So we might be in a little holding pattern, but that would be the same for everybody nationally under the way that legislation would play out. So I think things are going in the right direction. Clearly they're a little bit slower than any of us in the room would have liked, but clearly a general election is quite a big deal and needs to be given the credence that it was given. But I think hopefully now we'll see the wheels turn a little bit faster through summer into early autumn, and we'll get to know what that backstop date is, and then we can go to reset and recover.
Sorry. The item is open for discussion. If you've got any questions, please raise your hands. No? Okay. There are no questions, and therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to accept the verbal update. Can you please raise your hand if you agree with the verbal update? Thank you, members. There are no raised hands, therefore the update is agreed. Thank you for your time, Mark. I understand that you would like to leave the meeting now because you've got... Oh, sorry, Peter.
I would say this probably is the last time we will see Mark, as Mark is moving on to pastures new. So we have a new audit partner who will be coming and doing the 23-24 audit, I believe. I think it's actually quite good news for us because Mark's moving on because we're seen as pretty low risk. And Mark is moving on to places where, and I won't mention names because it wouldn't be good, but Mark's moving on to areas where they're not quite as low risk as us. So I would just personally like to thank Mark for the time he's been our audit partner, and it's worked really well for us. So I do wish you all the best, Mark.
Thank you for that, very kind. And equally, I think our relationship has been really good. Over the last 5 years of my tenure, I would have had to rotate at some point in the imminent future. Anyway, this has just brought it forward so I can focus on some higher risk areas, as Peter says. But I would hopefully be able to see your draft accounts come through, and then the new audit partner sign them off on the timetable that I've agreed with you, and we're all back and you're all on the recovered timeline for local government, and that would be good. And maybe in another 5 years' time I can rotate back round. And I'd be disappointed if Mark's still here and hasn't managed to get retirement by then. But thank you. I do have a 5:30 in Peterborough, so if I could go, that would be very kind. But thank you for our time together.
Thank you, Mark. I echo Peter's comments, and the committee thank you for your input. Thank you. Agenda item 9 is the draft annual governance statement for 23-24. I now call upon David Thacker to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I commence on item 9, I just wanted to mention that this is my last meeting for Fenland District Council as and taking over on a permanent basis to my right is Deborah Moss, who's the new head of internal audit. And going forward, Deborah will be in these meetings presenting reports for the committee. But as this refers to 23-24, which is the year I was incumbent, I'm presenting both the annual governance statement and the audit opinion, which will be item number 10. But say Deborah will support me in if I stray anything from what I meant to be saying on this. Yeah. So in respect to the annual governance statement for 23-24, it is a draft, of you notice, on the agenda item, because it goes hand in hand with the statement of accounts, and as Mark has said from EY, those will be finalised later on. So, I mean, basically, the AGS was compiled along the 7 principles of good governance, which we have worked upon and interacted with senior management. The biggest change in the report is just in terms of evidencing good governance, is that I think if you see on, let me just get the page right. Forgotten it. Anyway, it's my apologies to the committee. The biggest change in governance is that we started there's an internal corporate governance group. That was started earlier this calendar year, and it includes senior management members, including plus audit, to start looking at governance issues around the council in general. It's the vehicle that I think internally the council was missing, and it's going to be used. It will oversee the annual governance statement production. It will also look at governance items throughout the year that affect, and it will also have it'll be fed into from information governance as well. So it's getting more robust. The internal governance structure of the council is definitely improving, and there's been a good positivity within senior management for this, and hence the annual governance statement, whilst it hasn't changed much in its structure, it certainly will get a bit more robust in the information that's in there. And from it is also the evidencing of the governance items, which we will look to improve. So on that note, there are still some improvements logged at the back. There's still an outstanding one from 21-22, which is linked into the new procurement legislation, which doesn't come into force until probably the autumn this year. The next item on policies has been completed, but I've left it in the document as to show that it's been completed. and there is a new item for 23-24 which is relevant to Principle F about managing risks, where we are through the governance group, we're looking to work on assurance mapping. So this is the identification of all different types of assurance that can be provided to senior management. Where audit doesn't cover it, we know that the council does cover it, but we're trying to demonstrate how we've covered that assurance. So that will give that comprehensive look to the AGS and allow Section 151, the leader, and I forgot the other chief exec. Of course, how could I forget the chief exec to sign off the document? My apologies, Paul. So that's it for the AGS from me.
Thank you, David. Can I have a proposer of the report, please? Anybody? Councillor Tierney. Seconder? Councillor Christie, thank you. I now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments. Councillor Christie.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that, David. I think it sort of comes under governance. One of the things I was going to ask about was the sit for positioning statement on audit committees 2022. It recommends that we have, or audit committees have an independent member, where it's not required on there. I just wondered, well, maybe it's a question to Peter really, is that something you think we should do or we should approach that? And just for clarity, it's an independent member as opposed to a person from a, well, because the independent party, but it's a non-political role to help advise the chairman. Yeah.
I think we have previously brought a paper on independent members to this committee, and we are going to bring a paper back, Gary, on that. Sorry, Councillor Christie, on that. So that is on the work plan, so we haven't forgotten that, and we will bring that to a future committee for more discussion. It isn't legislation yet. We think it will go that way, and it's certainly heading in that direction. So we will bring that back for a more detailed discussion at a later date. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? No? There are no further speakers, therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to review and approve the draft annual governance statement for 23-24. Please can you raise your hand if you disagree with the report recommendations? Otherwise I will take it that you agree. There are no raised hands, therefore the recommendation is approved. Thank you, members. Agenda item 10 is the internal audit outturn and quality assurance review. Now call upon David again to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so the outturn report or the audit opinion is basically to cover the assurance work and any other work that was covered by internal audit for the year 23-24. So this, I arrived in May 23, so just after the start of the financial year. So I was able to look at the audit plan, make some amendments with the guidance of senior management, and we were able to deliver 19 pieces of work across the council activities, plus 4 from ARP, so 23 in total, which is fairly comprehensive for a small team. So I was the interim, plus we had 1 full-time and 1 part-time auditor. So that has been maintained since for the new year. But in terms of 23-24, the resources were good and we were able to deliver what we did. In terms of other assurances that to take into account, I've put it on 5.9 as well. There are other reports that we have used that contributed to the assurance discussion, as well as to some of the reports, like, for example, Steve Beecher's IT department, they did the NCSC Cyber Essentials review. That contributed to the cyber security audit that was done simultaneously. So those sort of pieces of work have been stated down in 5.9. So basically, we also look at fundamental pieces of work. So finance, we have to look at on a regular basis, plus also from the risk register, where are the more senior, more significant risks to the council, the ones that align with the council plan. Those are all the ones that we do want to make sure that we have touched on and looked at in the appropriate depth. And for 23-24, I came to the conclusion that there was significant coverage, and that I was able to deliver a reasonable assurance. And I'm using the new SIPFA guidance. It used to be called adequate. It is now reasonable. So you will see that term going forward as reasonable. So that's good, basically, in my book, but it's reasonable. So, so what I base that on as well, you can see is Appendix A is the number of audits completed, and what I've done in that, given the overall opinion, the numbers of high, medium, and low recommendations. The high risks are basically judgmental. They're all subjective, but we try to reduce the number of high risks, because for us, high risk means these are critical weaknesses in controls. So we try and we're hoping that the council hasn't missed fundamental controls here, but sometimes it can happen. So you'll see the majority will be medium risk. Low risk tends to be more administrative and good practice items. So again, we're trying to reduce the number of low risk that come through in audit reports. So what I've done in the recommendations, and I put in the theme as well there, is just give you a flavour of what were the issues that were coming up. So the first 4 were done by the audit partnership that look at ARP. So we were not involved in that, but there will be a meeting in September to discuss the outcome for that, and Deborah will be attending that virtually. So of the others, I'm not going to mention any specifically, apart from there were, you will notice on, I forget what page number this is, my apologies, let me get there, page 58 in the pack. There were 2 limited assurance reports that we gave. One was on debtors and collection agency, and the other on port berthings, which was a special audit requested by a corporate director in charge of the port. From that, there were some significant high-risk issues that came out, as you can see, 6 in the 2 reports, plus 5 mediums. Now, the debtors and collection agency one, and Mark and Peter are aware of this. A lot is now being worked on because we're looking at the corporate debt policy and the corporate debt management group that follows from that policy of how we're going to be looking at chasing debt and making sure that we don't have long outstanding debt and we recover the debt when we can. So that's in process. The port berthing special audit, you'll note as well, said that the high risk issues, the 3 high risk issues, have been resolved. So we've been given assurance and we've seen evidence that those 3 items have been resolved. And I think the medium risks are still being looked at, and I think transformation has been looking at this as well. So that's all I'm bringing to your attention within the reports that were done. Then what you'll see at the Appendix B is a summary of where we are, and that is on page 61. So this is where we've got outstanding recommendations. They only go back to 2021. I haven't gone back further, but these are the relevant ones anyway. So we have just 1 medium risk now, and that's to do with the maintenance agreement, which I believe might be done. I'm not sure. Is it, or is it? No, it's either about to be done or it has been done. So, but it wasn't updated in time for this report. 21-22, as you can see, nothing overdue. We've just got 3 outstandings, and they relate to the procurement legislation. In 22-23, we've got 2 high risks overdue, and I've been informed that the one about the port with the operating lease with LCC will be completed by the end of this month. and the other one related to IR35, the rules, the HR code of practice is being discussed with management. So that hopefully will be imminent. And then 23-24, you'll see that there are basically no overdues, high or medium risk actions, but in that year we managed sort of 6 high risk and 42 medium risks are still outstanding, but they're still underway for work. So that's the summary of the outstanding recommendations. Appendix C is just to show the audit effectiveness against the public sector internal audit standards, where we were compliant on 26 out of 28 and a couple of partials, but the partials relate to resourcing and reporting line, which have now been addressed. So for that year, that was partial, but they've now been addressed for the current year. And that's my report, Chair.
Thank you. Could I have a proposer for the report, please? Councillor Christie. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Mrs French. The item is open for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments. Councillor Christie.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. I've got just a few questions. I think 2 of them you've actually answered, which is about debt recovery. The first one was around Anglia Revenue Partnerships on page 55. It talks about the 6-monthly review of systems access. Do you think that's sort of regular enough, or is that something that's being looked at, and also how that relates to like levers process? Because restrictive access is probably more risky when it's levers and leaving them with their access on there. Do you want to go through the other ones?
I mean, I don't mind if you want to take them one by one.
Yeah.
It'd just be easier if my memory. Yes, from what I read in the report, the ARP have now said they're going to be doing them more frequently. They was picked up as that was the high risk, so they're going to be doing them more often.
The other one was around the trade and operations on page 56. There's a high risk there, lack of asset management plan, and it says it's a repeat of 1920. It sounds like it's been going on for a while.
For this one, I may have to defer to Peter, section 151.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Christie. I mean, I think this goes back to, and those of you who are here then, remember we lost in very short succession all of our property and asset management team for various reasons and for other jobs, and this never got completed. Mark Greenwood started with us about a year or so ago, and I have now put that on his objectives. I think the asset management plan is important, and we need to link that into the capital programme. So it is very much something that I'm keen to get nailed down.
And then the last one I got is on page 59. So it's ICT cybersecurity, as you guess. Again, it's talking there about the training needed to be completed by staff. I think especially in relation to sort of what's been happening recently as well. And I mean, as you're probably aware, there was the ransomware attack on Active Learning Trust, which Neil Wade is part of as well. So it was, I think it was last week or the week before. So I think the importance of that is certainly starting to become very, very high.
Yes, Councillor. I mean, to be honest, we're fortunate that we have in the room the head of ICT that may be able to answer that question a bit better.
I think for this last year, the 23-24, this week, we've made 100%. So I'm speaking to the training company tomorrow, and we'll start the 24-25.
Any other comments or questions? No? Okay. There are no further speakers, therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee is asked to consider and note the outturn for internal audit for 23-24, which highlights the audits that were completed as per the agreed internal audit plan and their associated assurance ratings, and also the additional assurances gained from the other sources of work completed in-house and externally to support the annual audit opinion. The committee are also asked to note the interim audit manager's opinion on the adequacy of the GRC process. Please can you raise your hand if you disagree with the report recommendation, otherwise I will take it that you agree. There are no raised hands, therefore the recommendations are approved. Can I just say thank you for all of your help and input over the period, David, and of course welcome to Deborah, who's taken over.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo that as well. I mean, we had Kathy here for 22 years, and so it was good to, and we wish Kathy all the best, and I understand she's doing well anyway. So I'd like to thank David for the year he's been with us, and he certainly helped us move the service on, and Deborah, with her, she's already given me lots of ideas and things that we can improve, which we will bring to committee gradually. But I think the corporate governance group is a really good thing that we've set up and is now starting to focus on a lot of these issues. But I've always maintained we've always been in a good place, and I think David's left us in a good place, and Deborah will continue, and we'll continue improving. Thank you.
Agenda item 11 is the Corporate Risk Register quarterly update. I'll now call upon Stephen Beecher, Head of ICT, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The latest risk register can be found on page 70 of your packs, where, as usual, you'll find a number of updated comments highlighted in green. The risk group has spent some time since the last meeting taking a more detailed look at the risks, and this has resulted in a number of changes being made to ensure our risk management processes are efficient and streamlined. You'll see that some of the risks have been combined with others, where we felt they were particularly similar in description and score. So after that exercise, we now have 14 risks in the current register. That's down from the previous 20. And just for awareness, the highest risk score from the individual risk was used for the new combined scores. Moving forward, there's further changes planned, more around the mitigation narrative in an attempt to further improve the document. There's one change this quarter in a residual score, which is against risk 26, which is financial management. The scores increased from a 12 to a 16, which is due to reduced confidence in whether the savings expected from the transformation programme will be realised. That's the only change, so as usual, more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Can I have a proposer for the report, please? Councillor Mrs French. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Christie, thank you. I now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments. Councillor Mrs.
Sorry, page 78, with regard to against significant rise in internal drainage levies. This is obviously something that it does concern us. I believe last year it was £1.9 million paid. I don't know what this budget is. I sit on 11 drainage boards, and it's quite interesting to see the levies they're trying to slap on us. There is rumour, whether it's true or not, if the new Labour government, they tried it the last time they were in power to actually dissolve the drainage boards and put everything into environmental agencies, which is quite alarming. I believe there's 236 drainage boards, and the last time they tried this, there was uproar. So it will be interesting to see if we're going to get any more money towards the levies, or if you know anything else.
I think I did report this last time. We are part of a special interest group, which is lobbying government about the way drainage boards are funded. Our drainage board levies in the budget for this year were over £2 million. And since we set the budget, we've had another increase, which will affect this year because we got the levies in late and weren't able to put them into the February budget. So I think that was another about 150,000. So I think it is an issue. We're one of many. I mean, that now represents over 25% of our council tax income, for instance, just going in drainage board levies. Alex, Councillor Alex McScandlin is on the SIG along with me as a lead officer. We've had to, since the local election, it's a general election, of course, we've had to change, and we've now got to refocus because there's new people in place, new ministers, etc. So we are pushing forward, but this is important to make clear that this is, we support the work of the industrial drainage boards completely. But it's the way they're funded, which impacts a smaller number of councils. But we do want to do something going forward about the way that funding affects us and others. There are other councils that are in a far worse situation than us, but we're part of that special interest group, which will continue lobbying, which will work. And there was some momentum that we got behind that, and there's some favourable noises before the general election, but we are still working on that.
I have repeatedly spoke at the drainage boards to ask them to talk to yourselves before we set our budget, which obviously would be useful. It would give an indication of what they're trying to levy you for. We had this conversation last year with them. I understand it didn't happen, so hopefully it might happen this coming year when you're setting the budget.
Is that a question to you? That's Chris.
Yeah, you can imagine it was related. It's on page 82, back to cyber resilience on there. And it's got the comment of the update here about internal audit or preparedness to protect our systems recently been completed and recommendations for this have been implemented. I was just going to ask if maybe we could have some more details around that, sort of what that preparedness is. But what I would suggest, Peter, is right if we be advisable to do that in a closed session, because it's not very good practice to let people, the general public, know what your cyber security arrangements are. And also to add to that, if we are doing that, it's to ask around how the council is preparing itself for the impact of things like quantum computing on cyber security as well, with asynchronous encryption.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. We'd be more than happy to, have a closed session and show you around if you want and show you what we're doing.
Councillor French.
Yeah, sorry, I have another two. Page 80, can you explain for the 10,000 tonne of dry mix recycling collection from August 24, the council have in place a 6-month contract for the tipping of bulky and dry mix recycling and needs to make arrangements for more permanent. What is your plans on that to actually get a permanent contract?
I don't know what the current plan is, but that's definitely something we can find out. That's the comment we got from that head of service.
I have another one on page 87. Can you tell me what health cash plan is? Is it? And also on page, last one, I don't know what page it is and I've lost the page. The council have now undertaken the accommodation strategy business case. I am assuming you've got two options. I'm assuming that will be coming to cabinet and full council sometime.
Sorry, what was that?
The accommodation strategy outline
Yes.
business case that will be coming to council or cabinet or both.
There is a business case that is with the leader, and we will then be calling a member steering group, and then the report will come to cabinet after that.
Any other questions or comments? No? Okay. There are no further speakers, therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to agree the latest corporate risk register. Please can you raise your hand if you disagree with the report recommendation, otherwise I will take it that you agree. There are no raised hands, therefore the recommendation is approved. Agenda item 12 is the Audit and Risk Management Committee Annual Report 23-24. This is a report that I've worked with David and Deborah on prior to today's meeting. It is the committee's self-assessment exercise that we will be carrying out in future, and we should be looking at that in a bit more detail. with the help of officers, I thought it was quite important to show attendance statistics, because we do have a history of not having very good attendance at this meeting. And hopefully it will highlight this to members that aren't attending with a view to attend more. I've not finished yet. Obviously it is a self-assessment, and there are a few areas in there that we should look at training a bit more in detail. We've not held many training courses recently, but we'll be looking at with Deborah to get them back up and running again. Can I firstly have a proposer for the report? Councillor Mrs French. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Christie. I now open the item of discussion. Please raise your hand with any comments. Councillor Mrs French.
Thank you. With regard to attendance, can I suggest you speak to the leader, you as the chairman, if we're not getting attendance, remove them and replace with members who will attend.
Councillor Christie.
Yeah, I think it probably relates back to the comment I made previously, because I think in this we talk about the background papers of the SIP for positioning statement and audit committees, and also the practical guidance there, which let's say very strongly recommends the use of an independent member in there. So it might be one of the things that maybe in one of the sessions we could go through those documents. There's some very good guidance in there that we could adopt as well. Yeah, thank you.
We did discuss about that coming to the next meeting anyway, so. Comments, questions, members? No? There are no further speakers, therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee is asked to consider and agree the annual report for 23-24 to be forwarded to full council. Please can you raise your hand if you disagree with this report? There are no raised hands, therefore the recommendations are approved. Agenda item 13 is the Audit and Risk Management Committee work plan. Are there any questions or comments on this? No. Oh, Councillor Christie.
Yeah, it's just that the one I know, again, I mentioned it before, but having it on the work plan somewhere around that closed session for cyber security, because I think it'd be good for everybody to be aware of that. Yeah.
Any other comments? No. Thank you. The work plan is therefore noted for information. Agenda item 14 is items of topical interest, which I believe there are none. Agenda item 15 is items which the chairman has under item 5 deemed urgent. There are none. Therefore, this marks the end of the meeting. The next meeting will be on the 23rd September at 4 p.m. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.